Hey guys, today we're going to disassemble and take a look and see what we got in the mail. So this is a purchase that I made on eBay recently. It was a bidding war, and got lucky and was the high bidder. So the seller said that it doesn't run. Maybe it's because of the carb. Here, this carb is very loose, so typical Traxxas stuff, but the head is really clean shape. And I noticed that the pull start is new. So those were, the reason why I bid on this. Just the head and the one-way bearing and pull start pretty much pays for what I bought this thing for. I tried to loosen this, putting a tie wrap or zip tie in here to see if I could loosen it, and I didn't. It ended up cutting the zip tie, so we're most likely going to find a zip tie piece inside, and that was totally my fault. I always have fun buying, relatively affordable engines online, and ones that kind of look clean from the outside, and hoping that a easy restoration can be done. And these 2.5s are starting to become harder to find, unfortunately, because Traxxas has been out of stock for a while on the T-Max 2.5 and the Rustler. This is an old style one-way bearing. You can tell by all of the different rollers. So the newer ones have one roller per, I guess, groove, and this one has three. So this is a definitely really old bearing, but it still works. And this is brand new, so that's nice. I will pull the plug off. That is something that I always forget to do before, or at least loosen it. So I just loosened it. What should I do next? Pull the carb off. We won't be needing that. Did throw a little bit of WD-40 to loosen it up. It did spin over, just a little gummy, which is also normal. Yeah, I can't spin this with my hands. That's because there's that. I just did. Okay. So there's a little bit of gumminess, but not much. Okay, that's looking good so far. Yeah, and yeah, that's nice. It's never been opened. You can tell when it's never been opened because it has that nice firm like click when you loosen it, and you'll notice a brand new motor the first time you open it, it'll have that nice click, and has a unique like sound to it, but then you put it back together and you take it apart again and it doesn't have that unique click. So I guess it's related to the torque that they use, or the initial setting. So that looks like that. So it definitely has had some oil. Oh, this thing was also put in wrong. It was not put in right. This was put in like this. Should be like this. So this was oriented wrong. So maybe it did get opened, and it's just me, but the conrod looks pretty new to me. I think it came out wrong, or I'm the one that spun it. We'll see in the video. Okay. But yeah, this looks pretty clean. Looks really clean. It's also the old style rod. Like, got nice sound. 2.5 will always have a spot in my heart because that's really where I learned everything, is running these things, playing with these things, growing up. And they really pack a lot of punch for the size of them, surprisingly. Like, Traxxas really did do something incredible back in the day. Alright, so that's good. This head is definitely salvageable, no detonation. You know, that's something that kind of sucks with these heads. They're integrated. They don't have a separate button, so if you have detonation or whatever on a motor and it's so bad, you know, you have to change the whole entire head, which is kind of, yeah, see. There's the plastic. That's all me right there. Pop that right out. I'm going to heat this up real quick and get ourselves another piece. Yeah, these Traxxas mills are obviously really cheap to run, and that's why I enjoy building them, collecting them, and so on. It's like the right amount of power for a truck. At least it's enough power to have fun with and not be bored. Obviously, the bigger motors are more fun, but a 2.5 has enough punch. And I'm sure once I start playing with the carburetors, it'll be even more fun. As everybody says, they make good power. So yeah, this is definitely tight. And I don't want to burn myself, but this is another trick that I have, is use a little, you know, use one of these things so you don't damage, you know, the surface of anything. It's all nice and smooth and round. Alright, this is out. Wow, look at that. There's like no wear marks, no burn marks, no heat marks. It's like somebody, you know, put some fuel in it for a very short amount of time. That's why it's all gummed up. If there's no fuel that came in here, then it wouldn't be gummed up, right? So it gums up when you introduce some fuel. But yeah, wow, nice purchase. Yeah, look at that. Always got to be careful when you're running this thing up. You don't want the piston to catch on the edges here. So that's something that you really always have to be careful and cautious about when the sleeve is not in there. You just got to make sure that you clear that. Uh-oh, okay, that's dirt. Nice dirt. Just note, yep, okay. This is completely tight, and this basically the older style piston and sleeve, or I guess the original rod is one that does not have the groove all the way cut through and doesn't have the oil passage like more, you know, directly to the wrist pin. coming from the bottom. This one has a hole from the top, so oil has to reach the top, and then it'll you know, lubricate the wrist pin. So this was the original, and this worked out really well, and they put it in a 3.3, but they had issues with the rods snapping, and so they revised the design. And some people say it's a, well, I don't know if anybody says it's a better design, but a lot of people blame the deeper cutout for oil passage of you know, causing them to split in half, or at least wear more prematurely, because there's less material. But for me, I feel like it's a better design because it allows more oil to go in to the wrist pin, and it creates, you know, a cooler environment there than this particular design. So I don't know, I guess that's just my thought, but whatever the thought was, Traxxas thought it was better to revise it, and they stuck with it for a very long time. Obviously the material they use is not the greatest, but we gotta work with what we got. So let's see what the pinch is like on this thing. That's really what I'm kind of curious about. Okay, so there's not much pinch. Huh. That's weird. Sleeve is like in super nice shape, but then the pinch is gone. That's really crazy. So that's not really much pinch. Okay, well, it's still a piston and sleeve that can be repinched because it looks really nice. And there's no play in the rod, so at least the rod can be used for a 3.3 or, you know, 2.5, whatever. This is going to be a problem. Let me just stop this real quick. Alright guys, so I got the crank out. I had some trouble getting it out because this thing was jammed up in here. And what else? I think that's it. Yeah, the bearings stayed in there. So typically, or at least a lot of the times, when an engine is gummed up, what happens is it'll like varnish over here on the side, and it will be really hard for the sleeve or the crank to slide off of the bearing, and that's like the hardest part to deal with when you're taking an engine apart that's old and that needs to be kind of refurbished. Like this one right here, this one came off a 3.3 that I recently got in a marketplace lot, and this one I'm having trouble getting the rear bearing off of this one, but you can see how the crank is nice. This is a 3.3. Turned out the 3.3 has some pinch and it'll be a runner, but I got to figure this out. So I let that stuff like sit in acetone. Acetone really eats up the gunk and loosens everything up. You can also throw it in the ultrasonic. The one thing you got to worry about with the acetone is that acetone will, the O-rings will swell up, so you don't want to throw, you know, items with O-rings. You got to take the O-rings off if you want to keep the O-rings in good shape. But if it's just metal, then you're good. I wouldn't leave it sit overnight because the metal can stain from the gunk and whatnot just sitting there. So those are just a few tips. I throw everything in there to kind of loosen everything up. But anyways, this is this right here. This crank is really clean, right? It looks like it's never been run, to be honest. There's nothing there. There's no wear on the crank pin. You can see there's absolutely nothing there. It's super tight. So this is my theory behind why right here it's going straight up like this. And this, you know, is something that as a new I guess a new person coming into the hobby, unfortunately Traxxas doesn't suggest to warm up the engine before starting it for the first time, but I guarantee you that the reason why there's no pinch to this is because somebody started this thing up or tried to when it was really cold, and it lost all its pinch. I mean, when a sleeve gets warm, you know, it discolors. This looks like a brand new sleeve, but it doesn't have any pinch. Usually a new sleeve and piston will come up to right here, like right here, and you'll feel that mechanical pinch. So you just got to be careful when you are running these things. You got to put heat in them so the sleeve swells up a little bit. If you don't do that, the piston will take quite a bit of brunt of that, and then you end up with something like that. So just to demonstrate, this right here, this piston and sleeve came off of the latest 2. Well, I wouldn't say the latest, but this has been in many videos of my T-Max 2.5. Not the most recent ones, but recent enough, right? So this right here, this motor, it was still running, but I decided to put a new 2.5 in there because you can see the piston is coming right up, right? But let's see if it does the same in this one. Mixing and matching isn't a bad idea if you get something that will. Okay, so this one does the same thing, pretty much the same point too. So this piston is worn to a point where it needs to be pinched. So you know, as long as you have a nice clean surface on both sides, they're very, you know, they're great candidates to be repinched. Let's try this one. This one's a little bit in worse shape. Yeah, this one too. So yeah, the sleeve is also worn down pretty bad, and it's crazy because there's like no wear marks. Like, you know, where it creates a seal, it still looks like a brand new sleeve, even inside. So I don't know if it just got manufactured wrong or whatever, but this one goes up like this. Yeah. So this one can also get repinched. These are 2.5s. So I just collect them and then I'll send them all out at once. But yeah, this one's interesting how it's in all new shape pretty much. And I mean, it might run, but it's kind of a waste of time to even put this back in. It does need a repinch. Let me get back with you. I'm going to get my calipers. Alright, so I got my calipers. I always like to see what this looks like. Yeah, 4.15, 4.1, 4.16, 4.1. Alright. This one is 4.15 is a pretty good spot to be with the Traxxas crank pin. Yep, 4.1. And this one right here, this is a 2.5. This one came off of this guy, and it is pretty also, it's also really tight. So I just wanted, I noticed it looked like this was a little smaller. Like if you take a look, this one just came out of this motor, and this was a 2.5 that I got, you know, whatever, I ran this. But it looks like this one has a smaller opening than this guy right here. I don't know, it might just be my eyes or whatever, but it looks like there's less of an opening. It looks like the distance right here is less. There's more of a ramp here, whereas right here the ramp is much deeper. So let's see. 6.3. That's 6.0. There you go. So at some point, these guys made an adjustment to the 2.5 cranks. So this is a deeper ramp, which means there's more airflow. 6.28. 6.0. And then let's see what this looks like. 6.79. 6.6. Nope, 6.8. Okay, so 6.8. 6.7. Okay, so even the width is a little different there, which it does look like it's not as wide. Wow, that's crazy. It just I worked a 2.5 crank, and this stood out right away when I pulled it out. I'm like, I don't remember the hole being that small. This looks pretty much equal. So this has to be a really, really old 2.5, and they must have updated maybe with the 2.5R, they updated the crank. But yeah, this is, even though this has a blue head, I mean, it's a new head, so the guy must have swapped it out. I got these also from the same guy, so he might have had this on there before, I don't know. But yeah, really interesting stuff. And another thing too that I'm getting like once in a while, I bought 2 new 2.5s, and the internal design of the piston has changed as well. Has a lot more material here, and I'll show you guys. You might also have, you can probably go back to my old 2.5, my newest, upload of a 2.5 disassembly, or actually just a build of it, and you'll see that right here the design of the internal workings of the piston is different. So really cool stuff right there. This is kind of history, right? But pretty much brand new. So anyways, I guess the win on this one is that I got a new pull start, a nice clean head. This stuff right here is new. I mean, there's no wiggle on this. So this thing really didn't run much at all. I think the guy pretty much smoked his piston and sleeve on the initial tank or two. And that's quite unfortunate, but yeah, that's just part of nitro. It's just, yeah, this is just nuts. That's crazy. I've never seen that before. Yep. So that's what's fun about buying used stuff and seeing what what status it's in, or what has occurred, I guess. But yep, that's it. I hope you guys enjoy this. I like to buy things on eBay and collect, I guess, and fix. And so I might start making a little bit more of these eBay purchases videos, and seeing what we find, like a show and tell type thing, less technical but more show and tell. And yeah, so I guess here's the 3.3 crank. So a 3.3 crank versus the, I guess, original 2.5 crank. That's a massive difference. That is so much more air going in. And I have yet to try a 3.3 crank in the 2.5, but I can only imagine that's a huge thing. I ran a Zero in the 2.5, and that woke the motor up like crazy. So if it's anything the same, basically it shows that the 2.5 can take in a lot more air, right? Another thing too is, if you want to check right here, the height over here, the cut, how deep this cut is, will determine the timing of the induction and closing of the intake. So this is 9.04. This is the, I'm going to call it the original 2.5 crank. Let's see what this one is. 8.95. So even here, this one is, well, yeah, that's 9 basically. So they also adjusted the timing on this one. That's 9. So just, 8.95. So ever so slightly they shaved off material down. So basically what that does is it allows it to open sooner and then close later, right? The deeper this is, the more duration you'll have. So the more open it's going to be, or the longer it'll be before it closes, right? And then what's really interesting is this is the 3.3, right? Well, the 3.3 is timed much more aggressively, and you can see right here, 8.5. So this is, well, 8.6. So the difference is 0.5 millimeter, I would say, right? Oh, that's 8.3, 8.4. So let's say it's grounded down 0.5 millimeter, or that's 8 point, yeah. So this one right here is grounded off. On top of it being so much wider, this is 7.5, 6.8. And then you have, what's the depth here? 6.46. That's going to be different for sure. 6.7. Yeah, so this has a much bigger window before it closes. So it opens sooner and it closes later. And it also has all of the, bigger induction wind, like opening here, for it to bring in more air and fuel. So yeah, the 3.3 definitely, is a big difference in all of those aspects versus the 2.5 crank. And it's also lighter because it has a lot less material, right? So yeah, so that's kind of like the comparison of all of these. But this one right here is really, surprising. I never saw one. Maybe I have, and of course I have, because I've ran these since 2004, but back then I had no idea, right? I was just learning and pretty clueless. But yeah, they definitely changed the 2.5 crank at some point in time. I mean, this is obviously clear as day. Yep, that's just nuts. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this.